Thank you so much for joining yours truly. I go by the name Benjamin Akakpo. In my other life, or when I put on my other hat, I am doing politics and current affairs, but I love books. And that's why I'm welcoming you aboard the Joy Book Club one more time. Today we have a fantastic piece, even if I say so myself. It's called The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. You'll be finding out more about the author shortly and about this book. But before I usher us into anything, let me first get an introduction from my guests, and then I will serve you my literary fun fact for today. So without further ado, let me come to my guests. Since there's one of you in blue, I nearly said, in the red corner. Welcome aboard, Eunice Fayose.
Thank you, Ben. It's good to be here again.
It's been a long time. Book review from way back.
Yes.
And
I'm glad I get to do it again.
Okay. And we also have here Makafui.
You're going to say Marcia.
Yes, I was. She has a nom de plume.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, we're three writers on the show today. Some writing and not publishing, but we're all in there. So I'll just quickly let you tell us about yourselves. Who is Eunice Fayose?
Maybe just a normal girl or a young lady, woman, whichever you choose. But I definitely like books and well into research, particularly communication and then public health.
Oh, communication and public health.
Yes.
And research, huh? Okay, we're finding out what you've been researching. Let me come to Makafui. Yeah. Would you like to give us your full name?
So,
because I'm tempted to go.
Yeah, so the pen name is Makafui Akins. I like to stick with that. The real name is Marcia, which you know.
Okay.
I'm shedding of some Eurocentrism, so the Makafui Akins is a good one.
Okay.
I'm a writer, as you mentioned. I also am a co-founder of a business development consultancy called Nevame.
Nevame. How do you spell that?
Nvame. Yes.
Okay.
So may it be, essentially.
Okay, Nevame.
Yeah.
May it be.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Okay, so right from there, I'm going to get into my literary fun facts for you today before we even get into the blurb and the author. Now, this book by Mitch Albom, The Little Liar. Yeah, Little Liar. It reminds you of the Holocaust, basically, what Hitler called the final solution to rid the earth of Jews. And so I decided to go exploring, and I found two interesting facts about the Holocaust, which I'll share with you now. The first, did you know Jewish people were not the only victims of the Nazis? In fact, other victims of Nazi mass murder included the Romani, and Sinti, people with disabilities, Poles, Jehovah's Witnesses, gay people, and Soviet prisoners of war. So if you never knew, while we'll be talking a lot about the Jews today, all these people were affected by the Nazi system. Then my second one, the Nazis didn't invent concentration camps. A lot of the time we hear about it and our minds immediately go to the Nazis. Guess what? The idea of a camp holding civilians considered enemies of those in power had precedence in several other places. Now you'll be surprised at this. It includes South Africa, Cuba, the Philippines, Namibia, and the United States. Now, the Nazi innovation lay in their use of poison gas to murder people at sites we now call killing centers. So, interesting dynamics to do with the Holocaust. But let me come back into the studio to my guests here, and let's find out what we want to know about the book, The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. Let's start with the blurb. Makafui, can you help us with that?
Okay, so we have our 11-year-old Nico Crispis, who has never told a lie. When Nazis invaded his home in Salonika, Greece, a German officer offers him a chance to save his family. All Nico has to do is to convince his fellow Jewish residents to board trains ahead north, where new jobs and safety await. Unaware of any deception, Nico reassures passengers that at the station platform every day, But when the final train is loaded, Nico sees his family being headed into a boxcar. Only then does he discover that he has helped them. He has helped send them along everyone he knew and loved to their doom at Auschwitz. Nico escapes, but he never tells the truth again. In The Little Liar, Nico's story is interwoven with that of his older brother, Sebastian, their schoolmate, Fanny, and Hugo Graf, the Nazi officer who changed their lives. Through the years, the concentration camps and decades that follow, Albom, the writer, reveals the consequences of all their decisions, ultimately bringing them back to where it all started.
Back to where it all started, Salonika. But let's find out about the author, Eunice.
Right. So Mitch Albom is the author of numerous books of fiction and non-fiction, which have collectively sold more than 41 million copies in 47 languages worldwide. He has written...
Yes, I just did that.
He has written 8 #1 New York best time sellers, including Tuesdays with Morrie, the best-selling memoir of all time, award-winning TV films, stage plays, screenplays, a nationally syndicated newspaper column, and a musical. Through his work at the Detroit Free Press, he was inducted into both the National Sports Media Association and Michigan Sports Halls of Fame, and is the recipient of the 2010 Red Smith Award for Lifetime Achievement. Albom also founded and oversees Say Detroit, a consortium of 9 different charitable operations in his hometown, along with a non-profit desert shop and food product line to fund programs for Detroit's most underserved citizens. Since 2010, he has operated an orphanage in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, which he visits monthly. He lives with his wife, Janine, in Michigan.
Interesting stuff. So there you go. We have our bit about the author and the blurb to the book. Now, my very first question, even before we get into your favorite characters, themes, and all of that, I did warn these two that I was going to get mischievous. Them. The Little Liar is the title of this book. Have you lied today?
Today? I know. Have I? No, I haven't lied today.
Is that the truth?
Yes.
It is?
So that's the lie.
Have you lied today, Maka?
I mean, perhaps it's too early in the day to have... yeah. But then I would have lied if I had encountered someone en route to this place today. A woman who always accosts me to take money. I give her every day. Today I didn't have money to give. I had money to keep. I would have lied to her, but I didn't meet her, so thank God I've not lied.
Okay, I thought this was where they would turn their guns at me, but thankfully
No.
they've not.
No.
You've lost your turn. You've lost your turn. The start of the book, James Fenton from A German Requiem, he says, "It is not your memories which haunt you. It is not what you have written down. It is what you have forgotten, what you must forget, what you must go on forgetting all your life." How did you find this book, Eunice? Like, how did this book hit you? Before we look at the characters, how did they hit you? How did it strike you?
Obviously, it's about the Holocaust. So, I mean, you try to see how it brings all the other stories you've heard. And for starters, this is fiction. So, but fiction that had some truth to it. But I found...
Part of it leans on real happenings,
exactly.
but interwoven with fiction.
Right. So I found it interesting and sad at the same time because I couldn't imagine that people could suffer that much with everybody looking on, doing nothing, and only lifting a hand to help when they thought, okay, this is going to benefit us, or this is the right time. I think there's actually no right time to help people. So it was mixed feeling. Of course, good book, but the narrative didn't feel so good.
But I guess it's the human thing, Makafui, now. Yeah. There are times when you would actually see in this modern day someone, maybe an accident victim, and all people are doing is filming with their phone, almost oblivious to the fact that life was slipping away, ebbing away from this person. How did you find this book?
Jewish history is quite reminiscent of our own history as Black people, having had suffered such horror, such gore at the hands of fellow human beings who, in so doing, were calling us animals, were calling us unworthy of living. But by doing the acts they committed against us, they themselves turned into that animal they purported us to be. And it's the case for the Jewish people. It has been the case for us. And it's exhausting. When reading books like these, then again, we know it's not fiction. It's like real stories, but as you said, interwoven with some element of the writer's own, like creating characters who actually lived. And frankly speaking, when you read works of art like this, you should know that there's more the author couldn't even cover. Like the gore you can't describe. Even the people who were in the concentration camps, after they left, some were doomed to silence. And we saw Fanny do that because she couldn't articulate. Traumatized. You can't articulate what you went through. It reminds me of this story they tell about that elder brother who catches his younger siblings and starts punching them in the armpit. It's so ridiculous, an act of punishment that you can't tell someone that was his plan, knowing that if you tell someone, they will disbelieve you. And it's the same, what the Jews did what the Nazis did to the Jews, what the Caucasians did to us, just too ridiculous to really articulate in art. Yeah.
Right. Dehumanizing. And I like what you say. It's a work of art, this book. Yeah. It's one of the books I've read on the Holocaust. Yes, fiction, but captivating, really. Yeah. Who's your favorite character?
That's tricky. Would you?
I'll go for Nico.
Nico?
Yes.
Crispis.
Yes. I'll go for him because Nico is
the little liar.
Technically not.
Okay.
Technically not.
He is the little liar, but he was tricked into lying.
Yeah. So you get it. I'll choose Nico because his character is not flat.
Okay.
So his character progresses with the story. And as time goes on, of course, Nico was an adorable little boy. Then he grows to...
blonde hair,
exactly.
lovely eyes. He didn't look like a Jew.
Exactly. And he was this lovable boy. Everybody liked him. Then he grew into a brave teenager who had to survive on his own. Then he became the enigmatic man we all really wanted to understand. So what is Nico thinking? What is his next line of action? Is he going to revenge? Is he going back to his family? No, Nico's character gives you something to look forward to. What is next? Keep snapping. What is next? That's why I choose Nico as my most interesting character. Of course, there are others, but Nico, yeah.
For you?
For me, I'll comment on the Nico bit. Which is, I don't know what the Jewish equivalent for the word colorism is, but you see how blacks facing racism in America in all their history. The issue has always been to differentiate to black people by how much you look like the white folk. The white folk has set themselves aside as a standard of... the
lighter your skin.
Exactly.
Reminds me of something I experienced in Cuba.
Exactly. So Nico's character and then how the other characters reacted to his looks was so problematic to me because that was colorism. Just because he looked closer to the person who was oppressing you, you went all over him, like, you're a beautiful boy, to the...
But I think, not to truncate your line of thought, but initially, I don't think it was so much about blonde hair all of that. He was a handsome, he was a beautiful boy. Let me put it that way.
Okay, good.
He had this, you know how naturally, when you see a baby with certain features, you are more attracted to it. Doesn't necessarily mean you are less attracted to the other baby, but so you just have a certain fondness.
So is that feature, and it's been so deeply ingrained in us that it's seen as the normal. Mm-hmm. What features are you talking about? We are talking about someone with blonde hair.
For me, it could be the eyes. Some of them have such beautiful puppy eyes. It's not even about the color of the eye, but sometimes these puppy eyes, they look so innocent. They look so...
As I'm saying, these are not like objective truths. They are subjective truths that have been taught us. We've been conditioned to see those as the desirable looks, but it's not the case, is what I'm trying to say. So coming to my favorite character, of course, reading it, Nico felt soft, easy to love because so the innocence I love. So he was my favorite. But then I loved Sebastian's fight. He reminded me of Malcolm X. I love because he came from a position of deprivation from his own family, never really having been acknowledged. It was when
he was never number one.
Yeah,
his kid brother was seen more than he was.
Exactly. And as someone who has never been in that position, I'm going to start to see things from people like that point of view, how it must be to be in such a position. And yeah, because of that, I really like his character.
Okay, so I have both of my guests opting for two different people on the spectrum. Yeah. Nico Crispis, who is basically the primus inter pares when it comes to the protagonists in the story, and then his brother Sebastian. Okay, do I have a favorite? No.
You should have.
I don't. I was just weaving through. Nico's character is very
easy.
It's very tenacious, right? And everyone in there. Of course, the last person who would be on my list would be Udo. No way. He's the Nazi guy who is perpetrating all the wickedness. In terms of themes, very quickly, and then style.
Yeah.
So let me start with Makafui on that. Yeah. Themes and style.
Yeah, so I love the blurred lines. You know, we are talking about truth, but then throughout, even though the narrator is speaking from that position that he is truth, he or she is truth, at the end of the day, you can see that what is truth and really what is lies. Can you follow truth blindly to the disadvantage of your own family? Or, you know, those blurred lines. And then there was the issue of love, loving to hold or loving to let go. You know, when it started in the train and the window was wrinkled open by the big man.
The grate was taken off.
Exactly. Someone had the opportunity to be given room to leave. And they were looking for a tiny person. There were kids on board. But parents held on to their kids because in that case, they were loving to hold, even though they knew that they were headed for their doom. But this little boy called Sebastian, 14-year-old, at that point did love better by letting go the person he loved, which was funny. It's an amazing, you know, in between that blurred lines. It was perfect.
Undulating. Yes, so...
I'll go for unhealed trauma.
Unhealed trauma?
Yes. Because for the wolf...
Why does Sebastian come to mind immediately?
Yeah, that's it.
No, you know, unhealed trauma started the Holocaust, actually. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The wolf, basically.
Yes, the wolf
Hitler.
and then Udo Graf.
Yeah.
Because they felt abandoned by their parents. They feel that, you know, they needed to make themselves feel better so that, you know, they don't feel that loneliness and all that. So because of that, they had to start hurting people and all that. So unhealed trauma causes a lot of things. And then we also see violence. Yeah. Violence in Salonika, we see violence in the concentration camps. And it's not a good experience because throughout the story, we see a lot of violence as well. And then forgiveness. You know, Nico's family had every right to hate him. But constantly, they kept forgiving him. Because, I don't know, for some reason, they kept remembering little Nico, his eyes, the fact that...
They kept wondering why he would tell this lie. The Nico who sings 5 when his grandfather, is it Lazari, had told him about what it meant to tell the truth and that God was always watching. Had never spewed an untruth, even at his own detriment. Why would he lie? And you realize that further down the story, someone will say, but why do you think? I think it was funny to Sebastian. Why do you think he lied? Yeah. What if he himself had been lied to or tricked?
And you know, that brings us to another theme of betrayal.
Right.
Because Nico was betrayed. He thought, okay, this is a grown person. I'm telling him the truth. So he's supposed to watch my back. He promised that I was going to get my family back if I tell them to go this way and that way. So he was betrayed. He didn't get his family back. He lost his family. And then for the Jew who was helping the Nazis, he also got he also had to be taken to the concentration camp.
Pinto.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, so what were all these for? It means he worked for nothing. So we see a lot of themes in the book that brings out the characters, that helps us to understand the story better.
Okay. All right. I think it's time for us, it's ripe enough for us to start getting into the pages. If you're with me, this is Mitch Albom, The Little Liar, and this is The Joy Book Club with Benjamin Akakpo. Page 3. And I'm going to cut down on some of the reading so we can make tracks and finish with, since we all are very familiar with the story. And I proffer that you grab a copy of the book. It's a lie. The large man's voice was deep and hoarse. What's a lie? Someone whispered. Where we are going. They are taking us north. They are taking us to die. Not true. It is true, the large man said. They'll kill us once we get there. No, we're being resettled to new homes. You heard the boy on the platform. To new homes, another voice added. There are no new homes, the large man said. And the story continues from there. That's how we're introduced to this book. How did you find this ushering into the book? I'll start with you, Eunice.
Okay. So it grabs my attention. So I'm wondering, okay, what's happening? Who is telling a lie? What's happening? Initially, my initial thought is, okay, someone is just a little incident of someone saying something that's not true. But as I read along, I realized, okay, this is like a bigger plot than I imagined. But just this first page grabs my attention and pushes me to keep reading.
And when you read from there, there's an interesting element because the author introduces truth. Truth speaks, almost as though it were a human being, talking about how it was there with righteousness and mercy at the start, and God wanted to create humanity, and he was thrust down to earth so that maybe everybody would get a little piece of truth, in himself or herself. But then we are thrust to pages 8 and 9. I don't want you to read it, Makafui, but tell us what is happening. This is where Nico is playing with the other kids, and it tells you just how truthful to the core Nico is. Would you like to tell us what's happening there? And then I'll come back to you because I still want us to get to the train incident. So let's get here first.
Okay, so Nico is playing with his fellow kids a game. I don't know the equivalent of that in Ghana. Will that be pilolo or something?
I guess elsewhere they would call it tag.
Oh, okay.
Tag.
So a game of tag where perhaps lying helps you win, but Nico chooses to tell the truth then. And it reminds me of two people in my own life. One, a lawyer that one of our lecturers in school mentioned, that he was so truthful. Can you imagine going to the courtroom with your lawyer and your lawyer is admitting to certain truths that are disadvantageous to your case? That's one person. And I had a cousin called Nasser who was a total opposite of Nico. That's a lie at the least opportunity. You know how kids, you do wrongs and mommy counts. Who did it?
I wish you hadn't mentioned it. Because now, whatever I say is, he's going to be like, hey, expose.
And who did it? And Nasser, coming from nowhere, will admit that he did it when he is not, in fact, the person. You have to watch on as your works is being taken by Nasser. But someone who tells the truth unapologetically, because I think it comes from a position of naivete. He's too innocent, not necessarily a position of having experienced the world and taking a strong stance. We'll get that in the latter part of the work.
And this is also because his father, his grandfather, Lazari, tells him while he's aged 5. They are talking about the mountain and Mount Olympus and the gods there. And he says, no, that's not the truth. And little Nico is shocked because his friend had told him that. And then he tells him, don't believe everything you hear. You must speak the truth at all times, and God is always watching. That will shape him until disaster strikes. Now, let's get back to that train cabin. They quickly realize this is actually a place for animals. We are not going north to get any jobs or anything of the sort. But what happens, briefly?
Okay, so in that cabin, once they get, Nico was employed by the Nazis to actually convince the people. In Salonika, he's known as like the truthful,
which is like snow. Basically
like
expressing his purity.
Exactly. So he convinces his people to get onto this train. But once they are inside, they realize that because of the way they are cramped up, this can never be a getaway to freedom. Then they realize that no, I think they only had one window. They realized that they had to do something for themselves. Unfortunately, they're only able to throw one person off the train before we see Udo Graf.
Udo Graf,
Yes.
the terror.
Exactly.
German who, just like Adolf Hitler, like we pointed out, he's been, there's this saying, I'm going to paraphrase. They say sometimes we fail to accept people from the start through whatever means, and then they grow, and in seeking that acceptance, they sow vengeance. All of those.
Exactly.
And that's a typical example of Adolf Hitler and of also Udo Graf. But Udo shoots the man who
Exactly.
tears off the grate.
It was, I think, in dominating people, you need to sow the seed of fear.
To shock them.
Exactly. Exactly. In order for you to be afraid of me, I need to make you know that I am more powerful than you are.
Ooh, I'm so
And of
afraid.
course, and of course, with a gun, he could do that. So he had to shoot somebody and communicate that if you also do same or you go contrary to what I say, this will be your end. And absolutely nobody will do anything about it. Not you, not your people, not anybody is coming to save you.
And you know what's interesting, Makafui, because in the end, this person is so vicious. At a point they say when he threw the baby out, he had a smirk on his face. He was like, now I've got you where and after the shooting incident where he shoots this person twice in the head, then he says, okay, I'm going to stick to my promise. I said I would allow one of you to go. And then what does he do?
He throws that woman I mentioned earlier on who holds on to her baby for laugh's sake. He grabs the baby and said, okay, so...
he wanted her to jump out without the baby.
Yeah, exactly.
No mother would do that.
Exactly. Leave your baby behind and then let me have... So you escape, leave your baby behind, and no mother, as he said, would ever do that. So what does he do? Freedom to the baby. that was a very morbid freedom.
He throws the baby out of a speeding train.
Of a speeding train, yeah.
But the baby would have met that same fate because the baby would have been gassed to death.
Yeah.
So it was
we
like
don't know that
an
for a
earlier
fact.
verdict.
Yeah.
At the concentration camp, they were killing kids.
No, but then in the concentration camp, the separation was much more of the weak, like the weakly, so the very old and the sick.
Yes.
Babies were given some level of chance, but
eventually you'll be gassed.
But then again, on the train, they didn't know. We all know that we are headed for death, but we don't know how it's going to.
And I feel the mother would have wanted to know, I'm dying with my child.
My child is.
Then my child, a baby,
Yeah.
Well, of course.
who can't fend for himself or herself, has been thrown out of a speeding train.
Yeah.
Is the baby dead?
I wish we knew what happened
Is the baby going
to
to
the baby.
cry
Of
at
course.
what? I mean,
It will die.
Of course, yeah. But you know what's funny? You mentioned the smirk. Another sentiment that he shows is disgust. He calls it melodrama. And it happens in recent history when people are marching for their rights, when they are talking about pains that they are being sent through. A lot of us look on with disgust. I mean, you are being melodramatic. You are killing me. You're telling me that crying is melodrama. That's insane.
everyone suffers differently. It's like sometimes I always say I have experienced death suffering, but never expect another person to react the way you do, because people react very differently. It could be that you lost your father. That person has also lost their father. The bonds could be different. The emotions could be different.
you
So
cry?
you always have to understand the other person.
You cry?
Yes,
you cry?
I do. I do. I am human. I do. I may be hard, but I do. Then there's also, but speaking of inhumanity, it reminded me of some scenes in Salonika when by this time they were in the thrust or the grips of the German invasion. And we're talking Greece. Greece initially, many people don't know that Greece was also involved in there. The soldiers were making some Jews squat up and down for a long time. Lev was in there, who is related to Nico Crispis. And we hear that at the time, there are German women at the side, smiling, laughing, and taking photographs, some of them, while other people are in agony. We also see at a point a man falls, a Jew, and his beard, they hold his beard and cut it. Now, if you know what the beard represents to a Jew, it's basically what makes him a man. It's basically representative of his manliness.
Yeah.
So by cutting it, and you would hear that at that time, everyone was screaming because it was like, you basically,
Abomination.
Yeah.
you know, and all of that is in there. So even as we talk about inhumaneness, it just strikes you how vicious all of this was. But let's move away from hate. Let's talk about love. Because there's a triangulated love,
Story.
interesting love. Nico Crispis, who is 2 years younger than his
His brother.
older brother, Sebastian. Sebastian likes Fanny. Guess what? Fanny likes Nico.
Yeah.
This is one of those situations you don't want. Eunice, any thoughts on that?
Any thoughts?
Any thoughts on that? Especially as you're a doctor of love. I mean,
Disclaimer. All right. I think that really for Nico saw Fanny as a friend,
okay.
and possibly Fanny may have loved Nico because of his kindness, the fact that he says the truth, and of course he sits in front of her in class. I mean, so if he's a sharp kid, you know.
The thrust of it, though, if you remember, there was a time she wore a certain dress, came
And
through, and
exactly,
Nico commented and said she was pretty.
You look nice
And basically
today.
that was it for her.
So funny
look
said
nice
today,
today.
which doesn't really sound like a compliment, but she took it. Today is like every
today.
other day, man.
I think she loved him to the end,
Yeah.
even when she married Sebastian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She loved him.
Oh
to the
yeah.
end.
But I felt sorry for Sebastian though. It's like you like somebody doesn't like you. The person likes somebody else. But you still want to like the
And that
person.
somebody else is
Is
the
your
favorite
brother.
child who has always been preferred to you, so to speak.
Favorite
Like in
child.
your mind,
But
you
you
felt
know,
he's the favorite.
but you know, if we juxtapose the actions of Nico and Sebastian, favoritism by parents not good. But I mean, Sebastian's actions earned him not so much love.
Okay, so we have to take a
So,
break,
yeah, okay.
but I just realized that, like you're saying, this runs through, right? Parents, no matter what, you can't love all your children equally. It's something I've come to realize. You love all of them,
Yeah.
but somehow you will show preferences here and there, and I guess sometimes we must all deal with that.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I mean, so first of all, on the issue of unrequited love, as Sebastian's issue, but at the end of the day, he got the lady that he wanted, didn't he? So sometimes
He
I
got
think
her? Are you
no, he
sure?
got to marry
What?
her. No, he got to marry her,
Fun-
and you know,
yeah.
when they were married, it wasn't her actions necessarily that broke the marriage apart. It was his own obsession. So after getting that, he obsessed about something else. So sometimes unrequited love perhaps is overrated. It's the yearning and not getting that makes the feeling look like, oh, it is a feeling. But
Okay.
after getting, I'm like, oh man, let's move on to the next thing.
Okay, if you're interested already, if you're loving what we're doing, this is Mitch Albom's, I call it a classic, The Little Liar. Don't lie to yourself. We'll be right back after the break with more. Welcome back. This is the Joy Book Club with Benjamin Akakpo, and today we're reviewing The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. I would proffer, get this book. It's a wonderful story. Also features the Holocaust and all that. But it's time now for my word in action, and I'm going to pick it shortly and read from the book as well. It is lithe, spelled Lithe. Now, lithe is an adjective, and it simply means, let me just get to this. It means slim but not skinny. I just wanted to read exactly what it said. Slim but not skinny. So basically, you can be in the middle. If you're skinny, you know what it means. It means you're basically skin and bones. But you are in between. Then you can be described as lithe. And we find some examples. I will read one to you. He had the lithe, athletic body of a ballet dancer. He had the lithe, athletic body of a ballet dancer. But how is it used in the book? It's used on page 12. The older brother, which is Sebastian, the older brother was bony, where the younger was lithe, and self-conscious, where the younger was at ease. The older brother was bony, where the younger was lithe, and self-conscious, where the younger was at ease. And that's our word in action for today. But let's get right back to the review now. And I'll go to my next point. You get to the point, Kafui, where to basically dehumanize, oppress, depress the Jews, the Germans go on a strategic effort. They take their businesses, they take their worship, they take their homes. And for the children, there's no school. And for the rest of them, you can't use public transport, which we're talking about before we came on. That reminds you of, would you like to remind all of us?
Which public transport issue? Remind me. You remind me
the
of
public
what?
transport issue in the United States. And I was saying Nina Simone, but it's not Nina Simone.
Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks.
okay, yeah.
Rosa Parks and everything in between.
Yeah.
And even worse, even their dead were desecrated. 300,000 tombs were desecrated. And it gets worse. Guess what they did? The tombstones were used for roads and the rest. And what broke me, some were even used for the walls of churches. And that really got me. But let's walk through taking their businesses, worship, and their homes.
Okay, so that's why one important theme of the book, it really stands strong, the fact that, one, you have to be able to forget, which was Sebastian's fatal flaw in a way, but do not forget so entirely that you repeat the mistakes of the past.
Okay.
So forgetting it can be quite dangerous because forgetting can lead to repetition. And it's the same, the Jewish story, African-American story, African story. And one other aspect that, what was the name of that character? Can you repeat that bit again? Yes. So forgetting is dangerous because when you forget, the past
is it from
can
the start
be repeated.
of the book?
Can be repeated.
The quote, it says, it is not your memories which haunt you.
Exactly.
It is not what you have written down.
Yeah.
It is what you have forgotten, what you must forget, what you must go on forgetting all your life.
Exactly. So you mentioned that strategically, these are the things that they did. They took your homes, they took your worship, they took their education, which really hurt them the most because they know how powerful education is for your future. And this trend is something that's repeated across histories, right from the creation of Britain, to Britain finding their way on our shores, to the Jews suffering these ills that were imposed on them by the Nazis. The strategies are always the same. Your livelihood is taken, your way of thinking, your language is taken. And this might sound quite exoteric, but I've always wondered, you see, when your language is taken, in a way, your intelligence is also taken. How are you able to articulate your deepest thoughts if the way that you say it is not even your own language? That's why you have Ghanaians who are very brilliant. There are things inside us that can really benefit the world around us. But then the language that has been imposed on you, you can't articulate, express yourself through that language. So the trend is always the same, and we should always look out to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself because the tracks are laid and it will always follow the same trajectory.
And in all of this, we also have a certain Yaki Pinto, poor Yaki Pinto, because he is in between. He's a Jew, all right, but he has other roots and he speaks German. So he feels, there's also that thing. And we also saw it in colonialism in Africa. Maybe the person who could speak some English or even Dutch and who could express himself in between, feeling superior. They are in the end, it never ends well. But that's the story of Yaki Pinto.
But if we read on, we realize that it's a survival instinct, like it's a survival strategy. Because at a point...
But where do you draw the line is the question.
Well, Exactly.
Because at a
You know,
point,
this is like survival
you see
of the
him
fittest.
actually very proud of this until,
And
Udo
at a-
Graf is posted to Auschwitz, and then all of a sudden, the scales fall off his
But
eyes
you know
because
when
he's
he has
thrust
to-
in just like every other Jew.
But you know when he has to go, he only thrusting at the final collection, the final collection day. That is when he goes with them. But you realize that every time he has to go to the train station with Udo Graf, just to look at these people, he feels sad. He bows his head because he feels that, why should I be doing this to my people? He gets it. So while he is sad that he's doing this, he needs to survive because he believes that he will be saved in the end, but he was betrayed as he finds it. So he gets to go to the country.
You're being kind to this Uncle Tom. Like, he was just a plain Uncle Tom. That's, it always happens.
Is that not a bit harsh? Referring to him as an Uncle
He
Tom
was.
from Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? Right.
No, so yeah, the way Uncle Toms were perceived in the United States of America, people who feel like they are part of the oppressor, right? Just because you've been given like a sliver of come and join us, hurt your people. It's never the case. Once we are done with, you are disposed.
He didn't really have any privileges because even when the first time we heard Udo Graf speak to him in the Crispy's home, and he wasn't kind. Udo Graf wasn't kind to him.
The gift of life.
Exactly.
Life.
So we need to understand from that point that he was only surviving. And we could tell from their interaction that he was just being used. And he himself understood that he was just being used, but he was buying time.
Well, time unfortunately caught up with him. And just as everyone else, maybe better to be an honest, I don't know,
and you're
collaborator, but
dead and gone, but people who fight a little. Look at the great work Sebastian did for the community. Had it not been for him in this setting of the story, look at Greece being having the largest population of Jewish people. A lot of people, when talking about the Holocaust, we focused on Germany, we followed on Poland. None of us really had Greece in mind. So stories left untold, and as I said, when it's forgotten, repetition, the chances of repetition is always very high. So, like, heroism comes with a cost.
Right. It does. But, sometimes what hurts you the most is not your death or something. It's what's said after you.
Exactly.
And what's said in respect of those you loved. They will always be tagged. And in some communities, by word of mouth, that family, those people. Yeah. It reminds me of some politicians today, but me, I'll not mention I'll not mention any names.
I side with you on that sentiment.
Yeah, The evil man lives after them.
They will not hear it.
No, who will not hear it?
They will not hear it.
I don't know whom you're talking about. But for those of you watching, this is The Little Lie by Mitch Albom, and we're continuing with our conversation on it. There's also, eventually, Sebastian, there's a hush-hush thing done. Sebastian marries Rivka. He sees her as nothing close to, because he only has eyes for fun.
Terrible.
Yeah, the words he uses for her are not even. And interestingly, one thing though that I found as a little bit of a takeaway, we don't hear anything about Rivka ever again in the rest of the book. So it's like a character that pops in 1 minute and she's gone. I feel there was no development there. But then you go on, Nico tells his unwitting lie. Everybody is headed north. Then they get to Auschwitz. I want very briefly, maybe 30 seconds each. What was the Auschwitz experience like? This was a concentration camp.
Yeah.
Kafui.
Okay, so as soon as you jump off the train, you have to be sifted through. So men and women to this side, men to this side, women to this side. The old, the weak, in the lineup, you are just shot down immediately. They stayed behind those strong enough to work because the Germans were still at war. They needed human resource capital. So they stayed to do work for the Germans for free. As soon as you fall sick, you are disposed of while everyone is watching on. And then the infamous gassing. And by gassing, it's not an euphemism, like actually walking into a room.
Gas chamber,
to be
cremation follows.
And it's just gory, like, and animalistic.
What was the day-to-day life like? Briefly as well.
Farming.
Forced labor.
Yes, forced labor. There was hunger, illness, ailments. people didn't get the right treatment. The infirmary actually had no medicine. So you go there.
They were actually working you to death.
Exactly.
When you become too weak, they take you to the chamber.
They take you to the chamber. And little boys like Sebastian having to carry dead people or making sure that they look out for dead people and taking them to the chamber to be gassed. And of course, as she mentioned, separating healthy people and then unhealthy people, looking on where your relative is said to be weak and then they're going to be gassed. They were whipped. People were whipped as well, because I remember there was a time a man fell to the ground because he was tired from working.
Yeah.
And they kept whipping him to get up, to get up. So at a point, Sebastian had to tell him to fight. Doesn't he want to be free or anything? Only for him to raise his head and then fell back and died.
Exhaustion. He just couldn't go on anyway.
Exactly.
But which also reminds me of something that was written on the camp, which you can take literally or figuratively. Arbeit macht frei, which basically means work sets you free.
Yeah.
In the technical sense, you would say that, yes, in our day-to-day lives, work will set you free. But in this sense, it was basically, if you don't keep moving and keep working. You are literally going to die.
Yes, and that's a strategy the Nazis, Hitler used a lot, like manipulating language, using everyday language, everyday phrasing, and twisting them around. So if I say work is good, of course, Hitler, work is good, but you don't know the implication of what he's saying. He never used the word insinuation, like cleansing. Right now, cleansing is a good thing, but it means that we are burning people to their death.
You're talking of the final solution. You're thinking, oh, we are solving a problem. No, this problem actually involves, the solution involves killing everybody.
Precisely. So it's very, the words that our political leaders use, we should be able to read in between the lines to see what the implications actually are.
But, that brings me to, in some part of the book, Fanny had a problem with the whole situation being referred to as a Holocaust, because Holocaust comes from a Greek word and it means burnt sacrifice. And she just couldn't have it. Exactly. And I think I agree too.
Yeah.
Burnt sacrifice.
They were burnt.
No, but
some of them were burnt alive.
The quote to the book mentions the Abraham-Sarah story. We know how the significance of that. So for you to link such a gory act to a sacrifice is quite problematic. But then that's words undergo semantic shift and then they stick.
Exactly.
Let's focus a bit on Fanny, a bit quickly, because time is fast leaving us. But Fanny with Getzela, the Hungarian woman who keeps her alive by keeping her in a hen coop. And then Catalina, who later becomes their savior. And the linkage between Fanny, Catalina, and Nico. Who goes first, Eunice?
Okay. So when Fanny gets thrown out of the train, of course, to save her life, she goes around, walks for days, and then she finds this lady, Hungarian lady, who saves her. But in order, the Hungarian lady realized that she's a Jew, and she really wanted to save her. Because for her, for that lady, it doesn't matter on which side you are. War would definitely take something away from you. And the war claimed her husband. He died. So she didn't see the sense in giving up somebody to also die. So she kept her in the hen coop so that nobody would come to her house, maybe uninvited, and realize that she's harboring a Jew. But from time to time, she would
go into the house and do
eat and then help her sew and all that. Then we have Catalina. Catalina is a Hungarian actress who saved some of the...
At one point, the biggest actress in all
biggest,
of Hungary.
Of course. At one point, she had to use some of her money and some of her properties to bail out some of these Jewish prisoners. And she had to hide them in the basement, give them food. Eventually, she also suffered a lot because they took her to prison, they took away all her properties, so she had to relocate to the US. Eventually, when Fanny had to look for Nico, had to find Nico, she had to find Catalina, who would give her some postcards that will help her find Nico. Eventually, she finds Nico. Yeah, and the story continues.
Okay. What else can you add on that? And then I'll go and read something little from page 157. Nico saves Catalin, Kathleen saves Nico. Nico saves her again. It's like a back and forth of one good turn deserving another.
The other. There is a term that I was trying to find that was used in the book. It's one of the central theme when they were wiping the tombstones of people they didn't know, an act of love and kindness or something like that.
Yeah.
So doing an act and expecting nothing in return. So these people, the acts that they committed in that moment, they weren't expecting anything in return. But as you said, the world is just circular. It's either a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle. You do a good work, it goes and comes back and benefits you. So yeah, it was brilliant. It wasn't that, it was a subtle nugget that the writer put in it. I like that.
Let me read from page 157. It struck me about something we do. So there, the words of a blessing. There is a prayer that Jewish people recite when they learn of a death. While the words are in Hebrew, the translation is roughly this. Blessed are you, Lord our God, the judge of truth. Of all the things you could say when someone dies, why mention me? Now, this is truth speaking.
Yeah.
Why reference truth at all?
Yeah.
Why not ask for forgiveness, for mercy, for a soft landing in a glorious heaven?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's because the lies you die with are the first thing the Lord peels away. The lies you have told, and the lies that have been told about you. Or perhaps I am more important than what you think. And it struck me. You go to funerals and tributes.
Yeah.
It just hit me.
That's funny.
We tell a lot of lies at funerals. Oh, and this person was... sometimes I'm sure if the dead people could, if they heard what was being said, they'll be like,
no, that's
hey,
me.
It's not me they're talking about. I found that bit interesting.
Yeah.
It just took my mind to that. I see you wanted to say something.
Okay, so,
Well, you let her go.
yeah.
Okay.
So the bit about that truth, I think it was really hammered because, now they are Holocaust deniers. Whenever a tragedy is so morbid, I mean, that's why when it comes to rape issues, sometimes the victim is blamed. Sometimes human beings, we do not want to believe that a fellow human being is able to commit such atrocity upon one another. So we live in denial. There are people at this point who are still saying that the Holocaust didn't happen. I mean, Hitler did a good job of documenting the work that he did. You too did the same
Jude was
thing.
proud of what he had done.
They were proud. And you realize that when it was time for him to run away, what hurt him was having to burn his uniform. If watched on as human beings are burnt in their numbers, that singular act of you burning just your uniform, it really broke him. And it's just tragic that human beings, we can descend to such levels of inhumanity. So truth is important. The truth must be known so that it's not repeated again.
All right, so at this point, we have to wind down on the story. But if you read one of the pages, you'll realize that Nico becomes rich, Sebastian moves on with his life, Catalina, and everyone. How does this story end? And we'll leave the gaps to be filled by our viewers going out there and getting a copy of the book. How does the story end?
So,
let's do 1 minute each.
Story ends. I think everybody gets closure at the end of the story. So people get to know why Nico supposedly lied to them to get on the train.
And that's like the very final scene of the book.
Exactly.
Udo Graf?
Udo Graf got what he deserved.
He went to Italy first, smuggled himself to Italy, then to Argentina, and then to the States. And I felt, you see, sometimes we talk about hypocrisy. He ended up in the United States of all places.
Exactly.
And there's a story to that. He became a spy and everything. But eventually he was found out.
And it's so funny. It's even bigger than that. After the war ended, Russia was a very big ally of U.S. in this fight against the Axis power, Nazis and his people. But when the war ended, they immediately turned around and started working with Germany to fight what they now perceived as their new threat, which was Russia.
Right.
So hypocritical.
So I think Fanny eventually got to show the love she really had for Nico. And I think she had a daughter who she loved very much. And Sebastian, of course, his hard work paid off because all the people he wanted to bring to book, of course, Udo Graf got arrested. He eventually died because he was poisoned. I think for the last event, the 40th anniversary of the Holocaust, being sent back to Greece. I think it even gave the people of Salonika some closure. At least for some of them, they were able to fully understand the stories firsthand from people who have truly experienced the event. So they wouldn't think that they are in some sort of fiction or anything. So I think in the end, everybody got what they deserved. Kind of.
Except Nico. I felt like
Nico gets
dying.
shot.
Nico
dies.
dying. It
Which is
reinforces, by reinforcing
He
that
kept
narrative.
saying he was trying to atone for his sins.
Exactly.
So this was like
Exactly.
the
And then-
completion of his atonement.
Exactly, but it reinforces that narrative that real forgiveness comes in, that absolution, it comes with the end, like you would have to die. I mean, that's why some people end up ending their own life. It was quite tragic. He should have lived on. He had done his part. Look at how traumatic his experience has been for him to travel all over to try and really atone for this, the wrong that he did. So I don't think he should have died. But then that reveal of Fanny being the narrator, it was just so delightfully cheesy. I was wondering why that was, but then it was interesting.
The last bit I'll take from you, hopefully 30 seconds in. I know I'm pushing you into a corner. What lessons have you learned from this book, Eunice? Straight to it. What
Forgiveness.
lessons have you learned? Forgiveness.
Yes, forgiveness. I think that sometimes people's actions can be really hurtful, but the bait of offense, we need to free ourselves sometimes, because when someone hurts you, they go their way, feeling happy, going about their duties. But you take
keep it in, you're stewing in there.
Exactly. You take in the bait, you realize that you hurt more. So once you're able to forgive, you're not doing it for the other person necessarily, but you're doing it for yourself, freeing yourself, fly again.
Okay.
It's necessary.
All right, fly again. Don't stay on the tree. For you.
The ending theme of the book was never again, and it's one important theme for every group of people who have suffered in the hands of other groups of people. You have to take a vow that this should never be repeated. And I'm looking at it not from the individual, but in the nationalistic point of view. And to make sure that it's never repeated, you have to educate yourself on the past. What was done? What was the strategies that were used? We've talked about slavery in our history. Slavery, then it went to colonialism, then it went to neocolonialism. I mean, we see the trend. As you say here, if slavery came back, I don't think we would be ready to spot the signs of it all. So you have to study the past. The past informs your present and it safeguards your future.
Well, slavery is still ongoing.
Yeah.
It's called neocolonialism.
Neocolonialism,
And it comes through
Yeah.
in many shades and many forms. This has been our review of the book, The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. My lesson, speak the truth. It will set you free.